A legendary Supreme Court justice is dead. Justice Antonin Scalia was known for his unwavering conservatism, scathing dissents, and his wit. In fact, Boston University law professor Jay Wexler ranked justices based on how often they got others to laugh at oral arguments, and Scalia won by a landslide. He was known for talk of somersaults of statutory interpretation, pure applesauce, jiggery pokery in his Obamacare dissent, and the mystical aphorisms of the fortune cookie and legalistic argle-bargle contained in his dissent on the DOMA ruling. But not everyone was laughing. Joining me now are two men who experienced Scalia firsthand. Kevin Martin, clerk for Scalia from 2000 to 2001, now an appellate and regulatory litigation partner at Goodwin Procter. Good to meet you, Kevin.
Thank you.
Lawrence Lessig, another former Scalia clerk, 90 to 91, also a former Democratic candidate for president, current Harvard Law School professor. Larry, good to see you.
Great to see you.
So he told us today on the radio he was the token liberal. What were you?
I'm pretty sure I was one of the more conservative clerks at the court that year.
And that was the rule rather than the aberration. Is that so?
You know, we had 4 conservatives our year, but I guess that was the exception. Usually there was a liberal in the
When you
chamber.
left there, Kevin, what was your major takeaway? What did you learn about Scalia that you hadn't known before and that we probably don't know?
You know, he just really was a very grandfatherly guy. He was just a wonderful human being, and I think you cannot get that sense of somebody simply looking at their printed words on a page.
And as smart as everybody says.
And
yes?
as smart as everybody says.
What was your takeaway?
It's interesting, grandfatherly, I guess that dates me because, you know, I was there 10 years before that. He seemed very, focused and intense. But the thing that always has struck me about him is he just never realized how much he had won.
What do you mean by that?
Well, he redefined how statutes are interpreted. Yet all the way to the end, he constantly felt like still the world was not understanding what he thought.
Was that humility or lack of self-awareness? What was that? I'm so
I think
surprised
part
to
of
hear
it
that.
might have been he was just so happy to be in the position of dissenting and being the strong force of reason against unreason. But the reality is he changed the way statutes are read. He had a dramatic effect on the Constitution. He was an incredibly important justice.
Kevin, we're incredibly important. Where does he? I know it's early. Where does he rank in the
Sure.
pantheon of the great minds on the Supreme Court?
I would say he's near the top, if perhaps for this reason. By the time Justice Scalia came on the scene, the court had moved very far in the direction of justices interpreting the Constitution, I would say, according to their own political philosophies. It was not an easy task for him to move it back. It took an awful lot of convincing.
As a consumer of, or a recipient, whatever the word is, of his decisions, well, obviously no one would quarrel with a brilliant mind. There was also, it seemed to me, a denigrating piece of him. Homosexuality equating with incest, bestiality, affirmative action, kids in the Texas case might do better at slower track schools. Sandra Day O'Connor in an abortion case was irrational and can't be taken seriously. Why did he feel the need to be as biting and I think denigrating of issues as he appeared to be? Is my analysis wrong?
I think, well, look, there are 2 audiences in the country, right? There are some people who are very conservative and there are some people who are very liberal. And the same arguments that sound very denigrating to people who are more on the moderate or liberal side of the spectrum make perfect sense to people who are more conservative.
But even if he's not on the side of gay rights and gay marriage, for example, is the comparison with incest and bestiality helpful or necessary? Or?
It may not be helpful, but from an analytical perspective, some would say it makes sense. And so that's the problem. He focused very much sometimes on the analytical piece of it. He was not a politician.
Originalist is the word that is used. It's not, as Marco Rubio said the other night in the debate, the Constitution is not a living, breathing document. He was obviously praising Justice Scalia. As an originalist, I usually hate these kind of questions when someone said, how would a person who's deceased feel about something now? But let's do it anyway, despite my lack of taste for that. Would he agree with this delay thing that the Republicans who adore him in the Senate say is what they're going to do with any nomination advanced by the president?
That's a great question. I don't know that I have a clear sense because I think if the question were, what does the Constitution mean? I doubt he would see a hidden clause in the Constitution that says the Senate shall give advice and consent except in the last year of a president's administration, or the president shall nominate except in the last year of his administration. And of course, the precedent is pretty strong with Justice Kennedy in 1988 getting 97 votes out of the Senate. The other 3 weren't there because they were running for president.
Nominated by Republican President Ronald Reagan and confirmed by Democratic Senate.
Yeah, but the reality, of course, is that the whole process with the president and the nominations has become so incredibly politicized. So, as much as I think the president should have the right to nominate and the Senate should consider it, I don't think that if it were the other way around, the Democrats would be behaving much differently. I think this has just become the norm, and somehow some adult has to stand on the stage and say, enough of this game.
Who would that be?
I don't know who that is right now, because we've become so polarized.
How about his perspective on delay as an originalist?
I'm not sure that really plays into it at all. And I do want to take issue, though, with the Justice Kennedy allusion, because Justice Kennedy, you'll have to recall, was nominated to replace, in 87, to replace Bork, who had been borked even earlier in the year. So that was open much longer than we're talking about this opening.
But are you troubled, as people who've spent a piece of their life not only in the law, but in the highest reaches in the law, are you troubled by the notion that the American people will have a court for at least 350, maybe 400 days without a full complement and a ton of 4-4 decisions on issues, whether it's abortion or affirmative action or public sector unions, that probably won't get resolved? Does that trouble you?
It's not ideal, but it doesn't trouble me so much for this reason. The court has a discretionary docket. It doesn't take every important case that comes before it. It says no to lots of important issues. And it can always come back next year to decide cases that may have been split 4-4 this year.
You with him on this?
No, I'm not. I don't see the justification, principal justification for the delay. I see the power justification.
You say the Democrats will do the same thing.
Well, and I wouldn't say they're justified either. I'm saying we ought to get above, have to find a way to rise above this partisan warfare and begin to execute the government the way the government's supposed to be executed. And the problem is it's not just the court, it's not just the justices of the Supreme Court. We have this whole nomination process that has slowed to a almost halt, and we have important offices in the government that need to be filled. This was not the intent. The intent, the original justices are appointed within days, within weeks, certainly not within months. And the idea that we should be leveraging this opportunity in the way that's being leveraged, I think is just inappropriate.
For a lot of us who weren't good enough in law school to get the clerkships that you got, namely me, a lot of us believe there should be lifetime tenure. Justice Breyer was with me a couple of months ago, and I asked him the question about a limit on tenure. Here's what he had to say.
There should be a long tenure. Whether it's a term of years or not, maybe it would be better to have a term of years, but it must be long, because you don't want a person in that job thinking about his next job.
What do you think about that? Wouldn't that, some people are talking about 18-year terms, a couple of them would expire. We have a situation now, you guys know this as well as anybody. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, liberal, 82 years old. Anthony Kennedy, often swing vote, 79 years old. Steve Breyer, who was just here, 77 years old. The seismic shift in this court, not only Scalia's seat, but arguably their three in the next, could change this court for 10 presidencies potential.
Yeah, that's very true, and often you'll see the justices resign. It's unfortunate, of course, that Justice Scalia passed away before he felt that he was in a place where he wanted to resign.
Well, a lot of people thought Ginsburg was going to do that. What do you think about lifetime tenure? Limited tenure.
I think it's a great idea. The German system has 18 years, and 67 years is the maximum age you can be as a justice. That would be 4 of those members that would have to step aside. I think Justice Breyer raises an important point, though. You don't want them to think about their next job. We could solve that by saying, look, you have 10 years guaranteed, and after that we could think of it as a Supreme Court vote them off the stage lottery, where you just pull the names out of the hat to see who we have to get off. And if we did that and we had more regular turnover, the political cost of any particular justice wouldn't be as high. And in other constitutional democracies, you see justices being appointed and stepping aside, and it's not such a big issue every time it happens.
The problem is the stakes are so high, and that is a difference between today's court and the court in the past. You have so many very important issues being decided by this court, the social issues that you mentioned, that many of the justices feel that unless there's a president in office who shares their views, they're not in a position to resign because the results, from their point of view, could be catastrophic. If the court had less power to shape the national social scene, then this might not be as big an issue.
Yeah, and less power could also mean an easier way to amend the Constitution. One of the things Justice Scalia commented on is, his effort to restrain judges was weakened by the fact that it's really hard to amend the Constitution. So if the judges get it wrong with a statute, it's easy to fix that. But with the Constitution, we have basically no way to amend the Constitution now. And if it were easier to amend the Constitution, then the stakes in any particular appointee or any particular decision would be lower.
Kevin Martin, it's a pleasure to meet you. Thanks so much for your time. Larry Lessig, good to see you again. Thank you, gentlemen.